Okay, so we will have the head completed and we finished with the white yarn. What we're going to do now is join in our other colour. So we're going to undo the last stitch, so we've got 2 loops on the hook, it's a bit fiddlier, and then before closing it off we're not going to use the white, we're going to join in the colour that you've chosen by wrapping the yarn over the hook and pulling it through to complete the stitch. And then we're going to start on the base, the blanket part of the project. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the background colour so it's easier to show up. Okay, so row 1, before we begin, I'm going to tie my old colour and my new colour together, the 2 tails, to stop it unravelling. So we need the tail of the new colour. Keep your hook in the loop, it will stop it closing and coming undone. I'm going to tie a knot in the white that we've cut off and the tail of the new colour that we've just joined, and that will stop that unravelling. And what I'm going to do then is stuff that inside the head so it doesn't get in my way. And this blanket that I'm going to be showing you is the shell. Okay, round 1 we're going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then we're going to treble crochet into the same stitch. Remember, in the US that's double, so we yarn over, insert a hook into that same space, yarn over and pull up a loop. We have 3 loops on our hook, going to yarn over and go through 2 and yarn over and go through the final 2 to make a V-stitch. Then we're going to skip 2 stitches at the base of the neck, and we're going to go into the 3rd stitch and we're going to do another treble. Remember that is a double in the US, so we're going to yarn over, insert our hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and go through 2 and yarn over and go through 2. Then we're going to chain 1, and in the same stitch we're going to do another treble. Okay, that's another V-stitch. Then we're going to skip 2 stitches again in the base of the neck, and we're going to do another treble into the 3rd. Chain 1, and in the same stitch we're going to do another treble. Okay, so what we're doing is we're creating V-stitches all the way around until we get back at the centre. So we're going to skip 2 stitches again, and in the 3rd stitch we're going to do another treble. I'm going to chain 1, and in the same stitch do another treble. You should have 2 spaces and then it joins up with the next. So what we're going to do is slip stitch into the 3rd chain of our starting chain. This yarn's not the greatest for crocheting with because it splits, but it's so pretty. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so row 2, we're going to be working into the V-stitches and between. We're going to start off by doing a double crochet into the first V-stitch. That's a single in the US. So insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, 2 loops, yarn over and go through both. And then in the next space, which is between the 2 V-stitches, we're going to do 7 treble crochets. That's double in the US. So we yarn over, insert our hook and pull up a loop. Going to yarn over and go through both, yarn over and go through the final 2. Then we're going to yarn over, insert our hook and pull up a loop. Yarn over and go through 2, yarn over and go through 2. So that's 2, we need 7 into that same space. 3, 4, 5, 6, and the final one, 7. Then in the next V space we're going to do a double crochet, and in the US that's single, so we're going to insert a hook and pull up a loop, and we're going to yarn over and go through both, and then in the gap between the 2 V stitches we're going to do another 7 trebles. That's double in the US. So yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over and go through 2, yarn over and go through 2. Do that 7 times. Let's get some more yarn. 4, 5, 6, and 7. There we go. Then in the next V space we're going to insert a hook and do a double crochet. That's single in the US. And next space across between the 2 V stitches we're going to do another 7 treble crochets. That's double in the US. Okay, in the next V space we're going to do our double crochet, single in the US, insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and go through both. Okay, now we should be at our last space between our V's. We're going to do one more set of 7 treble crochets, double in the US. So yarn over, insert your hook and pull up a loop, yarn over and go through 2, yarn over and go through 2, and we want 7 of those. And to finish this round we're going to slip stitch into the top of the first double crochet created. That was single in the US. So yarn over, do that again, insert your hook, yarn over, and then pull that loop through the first one, and that is what you will end up with after row 2. Nice little frill to start off our shell stitch blanket. Okay, so to begin row 3 we're going to chain 4. This is 3, which is the starting side of our V-stitch, and a chain of 1. So that's 4 chains to begin with. Then we're going to create a treble crochet into the same stitch. That's a double in the US. So we yarn over, insert our hook and pull up a loop, yarn over and go through 2, and yarn over and go through 2. That is our first V. Then we're going to chain 3, and in the same stitch we're going to do another treble, double in the US, a chain of 1, and another treble into the same stitch. So if you have a look, that is 1 V-stitch either side of a chain 3. And then we're going to chain 5. We're going to skip the next fan, and then in the next double crochet space across remember that's single in the US, we're going to create another V-stitch cluster. So we insert our hook, we yarn over, insert our hook into that double crochet, yarn over and go through 2, and yarn over and go through 2. And we're going to chain 1, and in the same space we're going to do another treble. Remember that's a double in the US. Then we're going to chain 3. Then in the same space we're going to do another treble, followed by a chain 1, followed by a final treble. And that is another V-stitch cluster. So it's 2 V-stitches followed by a chain 3. And you'll know what's coming next. We're going to chain 5, skip a shell, and in the next double crochet across, remember that was single in the US, we're going to do another V-stitch cluster. So it's a treble, double in the US, chain 1, another treble into the same stitch, chain 3, another treble into the same stitch, chain 1, and another treble into the same stitch. Then we're going to chain 5, and then skip a shell, and this will be our final one. We're going to do another V-stitch cluster into the next double crochet across, which is single in the US, treble, yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and go through 2, yarn over and go through 2. And we chain 1 and do another treble to create our first V-stitch. Then we're going to chain 3 to separate them, and we're going to do another V-stitch. So yarn over, insert a hook into the same stitch, yarn over and go through 2, yarn over and go through 2, chain 1 and do another treble into the same stitch. Then we're going to chain 5, and we're going to slip stitch into the top of the first V-stitch we created, which is the 3rd stitch up. Insert a hook, yarn over and pull up the loop and slip that loop through the first loop. And it should look like this. If you look at it from the inside, it's easier to see. So those V-stitch clusters have created our corners for our blanket. Okay, now we're going to begin round 4, and we're going to be working into this next space, which is the V space, and we're going to chain 1, and we're going to create 7 treble crochets into that V space, and that is a shell. So we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into that V stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over and go through 2, and yarn over and go through 2. We're going to do that 7 times into that same space. To create our shell, and then we're going to double crochet into the chain 3 space. Remember, that's single in the US. So insert a hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and go through both. And then in the next V stitch, we're going to create another cluster, another shell. So we yarn over, insert our hook and pull up a loop, and we're going to do a treble. So yarn over and go through 2, and yarn over and go through 2. Remember, in the US that's double, so we create 7 of those in that same V-stitch. Okay, and then what we're going to do is, this is the chain 5 that we did in the previous row. We're going to ignore that and we're going to insert our hook and do a double crochet in the 4th treble of the previous shell. Remember, that is a double in the UK, a single in the US. So we're going to insert our hook into the 4th shell, make sure that the chain 5 is sitting on top. We're going to yarn over, so that's around the chain 5, and pull up a loop. And then we're going to yarn over and go through both loops, and you will see it's tied the chain 5 down. Then we're going to do another shell cluster in the next V-stitch. Another shell, apologies, so it's a 7 treble crochet in the next V-stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook and pull up a loop, yarn over and go through 2, yarn over and go through 2, and do that 7 times. So we're just repeating what we did in the first section. We're going to create a double crochet into the chain 3 space, single in the US, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and go through both. Then another 7 shell treble crochets into the next V space. Okay, and like before, we're going to find the 4th treble of our previous row, and we're going to do a double crochet into that space around the chain 5. Remember, in the US this is a single, so insert your hook into the 4th treble and yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and go through both. And what we're going to do is repeat that all the way around. So we're going to do in each V space a shell of 7 treble crochets, that's double in the US. In between, we're going to do a double crochet, that's a single in the US, and then in the 4th space, the 4th treble of the shell below, around the chain 5, we're going to do a double crochet, and then repeat that to the end, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so I've just completed my last double crochet around the chain 5, and I'm going to slip stitch into the first treble crochet that we created of the fan stitch, the shell stitch, and your row should look like this. On the underside, looks like a little flower. Okay, to begin row 5, we're going to create a chain of 4. That's the side of our first V-stitch and a chain 1, and then we're going to yarn over and do another treble into that first double crochet. Remember, we're going back a space slightly, but it doesn't matter, it's still going to look the same. And do another treble. So there we go. Then we're going to chain 5, and we're going to skip this shell, and in the centre of the 2 shells we're going to do a V-stitch cluster. So we're going to yarn over and insert our hook, and we're going to do a treble, followed by a chain 1, another treble, that's 1 V-stitch, then we're going to do a chain of 3 to separate them, and we're going to do another V-stitch. So yarn over and insert your hook for a treble, chain 1, yarn over, insert a hook for a final treble into the same stitch, and there's our V-stitch cluster. We're going to chain 5, then we're going to skip the next shell, and we're going to do a V-stitch into this double crochet. So we're going to yarn over and insert a hook for a treble, yarn over and go through 2, yarn over and go through 2. Remember, when I say treble in the US, that's double. we're going to chain 1 and we're going to do a treble into that same space. Chain 5, then we're going to skip the next shell, and the next one after that will be a V-stitch cluster. So we're going to yarn over and insert a hook for a treble, chain 1, same space, another treble, chain 3, same space, another V-stitch, which is a treble, a chain 1 and a treble. That's our second corner. Then we're going to chain 5, skip the shell, and in the next one we're going to do a V-stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook into that double and do a treble, a chain 1 and another treble. That looks a bit messy. I've picked up the split bit of the yarn. We're going to chain 5, which takes us to the next corner. We're going to skip a shell, and between the two shells we're going to create a V-stitch cluster, which is a treble, a chain 1 and a treble, chain 3, a treble, a chain 1 and a treble. And that's the V-stitch cluster. Treble, chain 1 treble, chain 3, a treble, chain 1 and a treble, V-stitch cluster. We're going to chain 5, and then we're going to do a V-stitch into the next double crochet. So we skip the shell, the next double crochet along, we're going to do a V-stitch, which is the side of our square. So the sides have a V-stitch and the corners have a V-stitch cluster, separated by a chain 5. Okay, so this is our final corner. So a V-stitch cluster, a treble, chain 1, a treble, and after saying I love this yarn, I've had problems and I've had to deal with some joins on it. I'm going to chain 3, I'm going to do another treble into that same space. I think I'm going to have to cut this yarn again. So many joins in it this time, I'm not happy. So I'm going to go back. Snip that. Okay, so I've just rejoined the colour because of the split in the yarn. I'm going to chain 3, do another treble into that same stitch, followed by a chain 1 and another treble into that same stitch to complete our V-stitch cluster. Then we're going to chain 5, and we're going to complete a slip stitch into the top of the chain 3 of our starting chain, and that's the row complete. Have a look. In the corners we have a V-stitch cluster, and in the sides we have just a V-stitch. Okay, to begin round 6 we're going to complete a shell in the side V's, and that's 7 treble crochets. Remember, that's double in the US. To complete 7 into that one space, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. Then we're going to anchor down the 5, the shell from the previous row, by double crochet into the 4th treble of the previous row, and then on the corners we're going to do a shell, a double crochet followed by a shell. So it's 7 trebles into the first V-stitch, that's 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. Then the chain 3 space we're going to do a double crochet, so let's insert hook, yarn over and go through both, and then we're going to do another 7 treble crochets into the next V-stitch to create another shell. That's 5, 6, 7, and we're going to anchor it down the chain by completing a double crochet into the treble of the shell before, and then we're going to repeat that all the way around. So in the next V, which is on the side of our square, we're going to do a shell, anchor the next chain 5 down by doing a double crochet, and then in the next corner we're going to do a shell, a double crochet and a shell, and then repeat it down the other side. So I'm going to show you that one more time, then I'll leave you to do it yourself. So a shell in the V-stitch, which is 7 trebles, then we're going to anchor the chain 5 down with a double crochet in the 4th treble of the shell in the previous row, and then on our corners we're going to do 7 shell, a double crochet and a 7 shell. Four, 5, 6 and a 7. Double crochet in the chain 3 space, and then a shell in the next V. 7 trebles to complete the shell. Okay, so if you complete that all the way around, the chain 5s get anchored down with a double crochet in the 4th treble of the previous row. Each V-stitch has a shell of 7, and the corners have a shell of 7 trebles, double crochet, 7 shells, 7 trebles to make another shell. Okay, so we've just come to the end of that row, and we've done our final double crochet into the 4th treble of the previous shell, and we're going to slip stitch into the first treble of the first shell of the round. So insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop and slip it through the loop on your stitch. You'll see we've still got the square shape. Each corner has 2 shells and each side has 1 shell, and that is the end of round 6. Okay, so the next 2 rounds that we're going to do are a repeat. So we're going to carry on doing row 7 and 8 until we get the required length that we want our little blanket to be. So to begin row 7, we're going to chain 4. I'm going to complete our first V-stitch by treble crocheting into that first double crochet again. Remember, this is slightly back on ourselves, but it keeps it nice and tidy. Then we're going to chain 5. We're going to skip the shell and we're going to do another V-stitch into the next double crochet across, which is a treble, a chain 1 and a treble. Then we're at our corner again. We're going to chain 5, and as we're at the corner we're going to do a V-stitch cluster. So we're going to yarn over and insert a hook and do a treble, followed by a chain 1 and another treble, and chain 3, followed by another V-stitch in there, which is a treble, a chain 1 and a treble. Now we're going to be working down the side again, so we're going to chain 5, going to skip a shell, and in the next double we're going to do a V-stitch, a treble, chain 1 and a treble. Now see, as we get bigger the sides will have more V-stitches in. We're going to chain 5, and in the next side after the shell I'm going to do another V-stitch, treble, chain 1 and a treble. I'm going to chain 5, skip the shell, and this brings us to the next corner, so we need to do a V-stitch cluster. That's a V-stitch, a chain 3 and a V-stitch. So a treble, chain 1 and a treble, chain 3, and another V-stitch. So you're going to complete this all the way around. Each V-stitch is separated by a chain 5. We're going to do V-stitches in between each of the shells, the side ones just a single V-stitch, through a treble, a chain 1 and a treble, and when we get to the corners we're going to do a V-stitch cluster, which is a treble, chain 1, treble, chain 3, treble, chain 1, treble, and a make back here at the end. Okay, so I'm coming to the end of that row. I've just completed my last cluster in the corner, and I've chained 5, and I'm going to slip stitch into the third chain of our starting 4. As you can see, we've still got our square shape, and after every row of shells that we do, the next row now will be V-stitch clusters in the corner, V-stitches on the side between each of the shells. Okay, so our final repeating row, remember this row 7 is our first repeat, and this now, row 8, will be our second row of the repeats, and then we'll just continue these rows as long as we want our blanket. So we're going to first of all complete in the V-stitch a treble crochet, and we need 7 of those to complete our shell. So that's 1, 2, Then we're going to anchor down the chain 5 by doing a double crochet around the chain 5 through the 4th treble of the shell below. Then another shell in the next V-stitch. 7 trebles for a shell, remember. I'm going to anchor to chain 5 by doing a double crochet in the 4th treble of the previous row, and that's the side complete, and we're now at our first corner. Now the same applies that we did before. In each of the V stitches, that's the ones that have a treble separated by a chain 1, we're going to complete a shell, and remember a shell is made up of 7 trebles, and we're going to double crochet between. Complete your first shell in the first V-stitch. I'm going to double crochet in the chain 3 space and then complete a shell in the next V space. 7 trebles. Anchor down the chain 5 by trebling, doing a double in the treble, 4th treble of the shell below, and then we're on the side. So if you carry on the same pattern all the way around, side V's have a shell. Each chain 5 needs to be anchored down with a double in the 4th treble of the previous row, and each corner has a shell in each V-stitch separated by a double crochet in the middle. So we complete that, anchor down your 5s, shells in the middles, double crochets in the corners, and I'm okay, so I'm just coming to the end of row 8, and I'm going to slip stitch into the first treble of the first shell we created. It curls around slightly so you get both loops. As you can see, we have a square still. Each side has 2 shells and each corner has 2 shells. And basically what you're going to do now is repeat row 7 and row 8 until you get the desired length that you'd like your blanket to be. So hopefully you'll have grasped the pattern by now, row 7 and 8. If not, pause the video, rewind it and repeat rows 7 and 8 until you get your desired length, and I'll meet you back here when your blanket is complete. Okay, so I've just come to the end of my row. I'm doing my final double crochet into the chain, the 4th treble of the shell of the previous round, and then I need to slip stitch into the first treble created. But what I'm going to do is, that is my last increase round, my last round of the blanket itself, of the repeat pattern. But what I want to do is create a final edge, and I would like to do it in this white. So I'm going to join in the new colour before I end this slip stitch. So I'm going to insert my hook, take the white that I used for the head, I'm going to hold the yarn over the top of the hook, and then I'm going to pull that through for the slip stitch, and then I'm going to tighten it up and tie a knot with the old colour and the white tail to secure it in place. And then I'm going to snip the coloured yarn that I finished with, and I'll work that in to the work. Okay, so the final round is just a finishing round, and you don't have to do this, you can leave it as it was, but I'm going to do a final round of double crochet all the way around. That's single in the US. So I start off by chaining 2, and I'm going to yarn, and then I'm going to insert my hook into the same stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and go through both loops. And I'm just going to go all the way around into every stitch, inserting a single double crochet, or an individual, makes more sense, an individual double crochet into each treble of the shells and into each double crochet between the shells. So if you would like to do that as well, go ahead, complete it. Okay, so I've just completed that row of the white sparkle, just to finish off the blanket, and I've slip stitched into the first one, and now I'm going to pull the yarn up and snip it off. Then all that remains is just sew in the ends. Then, if you recall, the very important thing about this pattern is that we have not closed off the hole beneath the head, and obviously this is going to a child. It is very important that we seal this off. So it's really simple. All we're going to do is create a circle plug for it. So take the choice of yarn that you'd like to use. We're going to create a magic ring. You can use a chain of 2, but make sure that you use a small, really small hook so that you don't create a gap for the stuffing to fall out. So there's the magic ring. Then I'm going to create 6 single crochets in the US, it's 6 double crochets in the UK into that ring, or the first chain if you've decided to do the chain method. So we've got 2, 4, 5 and 6. I'm going to pull that closed. Then we're going to insert our hook into the first double crochet that we created. We're not going to slip stitch, we're going to straight in and do another double crochet, single in the US. We're going to do one in again into the same one, so that's 2 in each one, and we're going to end up with 12, so keep count. So that's 2 in the next one, 2, that's 3, 4 in the next one, 2, 5, 6, next one, 2, 7, 8, next one, 2, 9, 10, next one, 2, 11, 12. Now if you ever take a look, this may just fit in the gap, but to be on the safe side, we need to make sure that we slip stitch into the next one and pull up our yarn and snip it. We're going to need to sew this solidly to the top of the neck beneath the first row with the holes that we created. So grab your sewing needle. Okay, to begin with, we're going to close off the centre of the magic ring, or the tail end that we started with. So thread your needle, and what I like to do is, if you look at your magic ring, there's a hole, the stitch that the yarn's coming out of, we want to ignore that one and go into the one behind it. And I'm using a very large sewing needle just to make things even more difficult for myself. And then we're going to pull the yarn back through these stitches, but not the last one that we used, otherwise we'll just be undoing it. And I generally do that across 4 or 5 of the stitches to make sure it is securely in place and it's not going to unravel. And that is going to get hidden by the hole anyway. So we're going to thread our needle with the other end, the finishing end of our yarn. If I can do it correctly, this yarn is really splitting this time. I've never had this with this wool before. Obviously not a very good batch. Okay, so we've taken the blanket, and what we want to do is place it on that centre. We're going to get rid of this tail in a minute on the underside, and we're going to go through one of the 12 starting stitches that we had. Pull it up, make sure it's facing the right way. Then we're going to go through the next stitch on the circle. This is on camera. And then we're going to go through the next stitch across on the circle, and you can turn it over to have a look, make sure you're going through. Then we're going to go 1 stitch across and come back up the other side and go through the next stitch of the circle, then the next stitch. Some of them are easier than others because you can see them from this side. Make sure it's nice and tight. And do that all the way around. And before you close off the last few stitches, stuff the centre, the starting tail of your yarn into the centre so it's hidden, and then work the rest of the way around to secure this circle in place. Okay, I've completed that all the way around and the circle has plugged the hole, and you can double check. I'm moving turning your toy the other way around, your blanket, and checking that it is securely in place all the way around. And then to finish off, you need to secure this thread to stop it unravelling. And again, I like to go through the stitch that I'm in and then back through it to complete a mini knot. And what you can do with this is stuff it directly into the head . And sew through a few times to hide the end, and snip off your excess. Once you've sewed in your ends of your blanket, that is the completion of the head and blanket parts of this pattern. I'll do a separate video on the ears, including the fabric.